It was funny, and at the same time it is not clear how life could turn everything around like this. 1 minute, I'm laying down rebar in the heat, boots caked in red Georgia clay, sweat running into my eyes. The next, I'm standing in the ER lobby, hands trembling, blood on my shirt that ain't even mine, wondering if the guy I just dragged off the asphalt is gonna make it through the night. I've worked construction most of my adult life. I'm the kind of man who doesn't mind the grit, the heavy lifting, the long hours under a pitiless sun. I've been part of projects all across the South, shopping centers, road overpasses, even a new wing of a hospital once. But my last steady gig was on a residential complex just outside Macon, Georgia. Big development. Fancy homes for folks with money. It was good work at first. The crew was solid, the pay decent, and I got along fine with the site boss. I had a rhythm going. Monday through Friday, up at 5, boots on by 6, work till 4. Rinse and repeat. Then the whispers started. First it was delays. Then the budget got tight. Then suddenly the whole crew was called in early one morning, and just like that, project canceled. Funds dried up. Everyone out of work. No severance, no warning. Just a handshake and a sorry, man. I drove home in my beat-up Ford, silent the whole way. Didn't even turn the radio on. At 43, with no college degree and a back that already felt 20 years older than the rest of me, the idea of starting over felt like a mountain too steep to climb. What stung the most was that nobody explained anything. No real answers. I'd done my job right, better than most, I thought. Never slacked off, never mouthed off. But apparently that didn't mean squat. Weeks passed. The bills didn't. I burned through my savings faster than I expected. Picked up odd jobs, drywall here, fence repair there. But it wasn't enough. Nights grew longer. Sleep shorter. Some mornings I didn't even bother shaving. The mirror just stared back at me, blank and unimpressed. Disappointment settled in like rust. Slow and permanent. One afternoon, after finishing a small roofing repair for a guy 2 towns over, I was driving back along a 2-lane road when I saw it happen. A flash of motion, the screech of tires, and a man flung forward into the shoulder ditch like a rag doll. I slammed the brakes. I rushed out. The man, young, maybe mid-30s, was barely conscious, face scraped, leg twisted in a way that didn't look right. Blood pooled under his head. I didn't hesitate. I knelt, checked for breathing. Still there, faint but steady. No cell service out there, not even a bar. I hauled the man into the back seat as gently as I could. Guy was light, but dead weight's a different kind of heavy. I drove like hell. The ER staff took over fast. Machines beeped, nurses moved with purpose. I just stood there, watching, suddenly aware of the blood on my jeans, the soreness in my arms. Someone asked, "You know him?" I shrugged. Nope. I didn't. Not yet anyway. But that man's name was Jason. And that accident, that single moment, would turn everything around in ways I never could have guessed. I stayed in the ER longer than I needed to. Nobody told me to, but something about just leaving felt wrong. I dragged the guy out of a ditch, watched him get wheeled off half dead. Felt like I owed him at least my patience. Hours passed. A nurse came over finally and told me he was in surgery. Internal bleeding, fractured femur, dislocated shoulder. It was bad, but they said he had a real shot, thanks to me. That hit me. Not in a bragging kind of way, more like a deep-down thud in my chest. Felt like the first good thing I'd done in a long time. A cop showed up asking questions. I told him what I saw, how I didn't know the guy, didn't get the plate number of the car that hit him. Officer thanked me, said I probably saved his life. After that, I finally went home. Showered, passed out on the couch, still in my towel. Next morning, the hospital called. Said the guy, Jason, wanted to see me when I had a minute. I drove over thinking maybe he just wanted to say thanks. I walked into his room and there he was, head wrapped, arm in a sling, leg hoisted in a brace like something out of a cartoon. Still, he smiled when he saw me. "You really pulled me out of the fire, man," he said, voice rough. I don't know what to say. I shrugged. Did what anyone would do. He laughed. "You'd be surprised. Most people just drive past." We got to talking. Turns out he ran a construction company. Local. Mid-size. Good reputation. Said he'd been on his way to check a site when the accident happened. I nodded along, half listening, until something clicked. The company name he mentioned, it was the same one that canned me last year. My stomach tightened. I told him. Told him I used to work there, got let go when the big Macon project got shut down. His face changed. Not guilt exactly, more like confusion. "I don't remember signing off on any of that," he said. "I was out of the country when that mess went down." He looked me over. "What was your position?" "Foreman. Crew lead." He sat back, quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want you back. But not as a crew guy. I need someone with grit and brains running projects. You saved my life. Least I can do is give yours a shot at getting better. I didn't know what to say. I'd gone from ditch digger to jobless to lifesaver to being offered a promotion in the span of a week. Life's funny like that. I took a few days to think on Jason's offer. Not because I didn't want it, I did, but because it came out of nowhere, and after the year I'd had, I didn't trust anything good to last. I'd been tossed out of steady work like last week's garbage. The idea of walking back into the same company, even with a better title, just stirred up something sour in my gut. But I called him anyway. He was still in the hospital, but his tone was clear and sharp when we talked. I wasn't blowing smoke, he said. I meant what I said. I want you running the Riverdale site. That name caught me. Riverdale was a big project, mixed commercial and residential build, 6-month timeline, lots of moving parts. I asked, why me? Jason didn't hesitate. You think fast, act faster. That's rare. I've seen enough guys freeze in a crisis. You didn't. I need that out there. So I said yes. Couple weeks later, Jason was out of the hospital and back at the office, walking with a limp and a cane. I met him there for onboarding, not that I needed much. I already knew half the crew and most of the layouts. What I didn't know, I picked up fast. My first day on site, I walked the perimeter, greeted the guys, shook hands, and got the lay of the land. Some of the old crew recognized me. Chris? Thought you were out for good, one said. Guess not, I replied, smiling. Back and uglier than ever. But truth be told, something had shifted. The guys treated me with more respect. Not just because of the title, but because they'd heard about what happened. Word spreads fast in this line of work. They knew I pulled Jason off the road and into that hospital. That changed how folks saw me. It also changed how I saw myself. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was calling shots, managing a timeline, troubleshooting on the fly. And I was damn good at it. Jason showed up a few times a week, mostly checking progress, reviewing reports. We'd sit in the trailer and go over numbers, schedules, setbacks. One afternoon, I asked him something that had been nagging at me. What really happened with the Macon job? Why'd we all get dumped like that? He looked tired when he answered. Honestly? The board panicked. Overspent early, then pulled the plug to cut losses. I wasn't here to fight it, and by the time I got back, the damage was done. I came back to a mess. Didn't even know we'd lost half our best guys until weeks later? I nodded slowly. I believed him. You should have said something, I told him. Folks thought you just didn't care. He sighed. Yeah, I get that now. I'm trying to fix it. And maybe he was. Because after that, things started feeling different. We brought back a few more of the old crew. Guys I trusted. Guys who knew how to work without needing their hands held. The site started to buzz real momentum. We stayed on schedule, came under budget in a few places. The team was clicking and it felt good. At night, I started sleeping again. Real sleep. Not that fitful, half-dreaming kind I'd been stuck with since the layoff. Sometimes I'd catch myself just standing on the site as the sun went down, watching shadows stretch across the poured concrete, listening to the low hum of work winding down. I thought about that ditch on the side of the road the moment I saw Jason flying through the air and how close he came to dying. If I hadn't stopped, where would I be now? Life's funny like that. By the third month, Riverdale was starting to feel less like a job and more like something I could be proud of. We were ahead of schedule, the crew was tight, and even the weather had been cutting us some slack. It's funny how quickly a man can start to feel whole again when the ground beneath his boots feels solid. One day, Jason pulled up in that silver Tacoma of his and waved me into the trailer. He had a couple rolled up blueprints under one arm and that same old limp in his step. Got something new, he said, laying the plans out on the table. It was a proposal for a veterans housing complex, low-cost homes, solid build quality, funded partly by the state, partly by private donors. It wasn't flashy, but it had heart. We got the bid last week, he said. I want you heading it up. I stared at the plans. There was something about it, maybe the mission, maybe the simplicity, that felt right. I'm in, I said. We got started the next month. Different kind of crew this time, smaller, tighter, some newer guys. I brought in one of the old-timers from Macon, Joe. A guy who could frame a house in his sleep. Jason kept a little more distance now, letting me handle most of the logistics. But he still checked in, still offered backup when things got hairy. The pressure was there, sure. Coordinating subcontractors, juggling permits, dealing with sudden lumber shortages. Nothing new. But this job had something else riding on it. Every foundation we poured, every shingle nailed down, it felt like putting something back into the world. And then one morning, it all came full circle. I was walking the site early, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, when this older guy in a wheelchair rolls up with a young couple. I figured they were looking around, maybe interested in one of the units. Turns out the guy was a Gulf War vet, one of the first scheduled to move in. He looked me in the eye and said, "I heard you're the one making this happen. Thank you." That hit different. I nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. So I just said, "We're building something strong here, for folks who deserve it." He smiled and wheeled off to show the couple around. Jason saw the whole thing from his truck. Later that day, he came over while I was double-checking material deliveries. "That's why we do it," he said. I didn't answer right away, just nodded, because he was right. I started out thinking this second shot was about getting a paycheck again, about stability, but standing there, with the smell of fresh-cut lumber and the sound of hammers echoing behind me, I realized it was more than that. We weren't just building houses. We were building something I'd almost forgotten I needed: purpose. Summer hit hard that year. The kind of heat that bakes through your clothes by 9 a.m. and leaves everything smelling like dust and sweat. But we pushed through it. The crew didn't complain much, at least not out loud, and we kept the timeline on track, hammers swinging, boards flying, shingles laid like clockwork. One afternoon, clouds started rolling in like someone had drawn a curtain across the sky. You know that eerie stillness that comes before a storm, when even the birds shut up. That's what we had. I called an early stop to the day and told everyone to secure the materials and get home safe. By nightfall, the storm was ripping through town. Gusts, rain in sheets, lightning like camera flashes. Couldn't sleep. Something about leaving all that work out in the elements gnawed at me. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on rest and drove to the site. It was worse than I'd hoped. One of the temporary storage trailers had flipped. Tarps were blown clean off half the framed units. Water pooled around the foundation of the eastern block. I just stood there in the dark, headlights casting long shadows over the wreckage. I thought about all the progress we'd made, all the hands that had put in sweat. Felt like it had all been washed away in a single night. But then headlights appeared behind me. Jason. He got out slow, walking with that damn cane like it was part of him now. "Knew you'd be here," he said. We didn't talk much, just started moving debris, tarped what we could, took stock of what we couldn't save. After a while, he looked at me and said, "We'll rebuild. You know that, right?" And I did, but hearing it out loud helped. Over the next few days, the crew rallied. Insurance covered some of the damage. Suppliers gave us a break on replacement materials. And folks in town, even ones who had nothing to do with the project, stopped by to lend a hand or drop off lunch. That was the moment I realized this build wasn't just about veterans' housing. It was about community, about showing people what could happen when you didn't give up after getting knocked down. And Jason, well, he didn't hover. He trusted me to guide the ship, even in the storm's wake. That trust meant more than I could put into words. By the end of the month, we were back on track. Some parts had to be redone, sure, but the frame stood taller somehow, stronger, like us. The next few months were some of the most demanding and rewarding I'd ever worked through. Riverdale had felt big, but this project, it felt personal. Every nail, every inspection, every conversation with the crew had weight, purpose. Maybe it's because when you're building for folks who've carried real burdens, combat, scars, loss, you don't want to cut corners. You want it solid, unshakable. I started noticing changes in myself too. I got up earlier even before the sun, made my own coffee again, cleaned out the cab of my truck without anyone telling me to. Little things, but they mattered. And I started calling my brother again, hadn't done that in years. We used to talk about Dad's hands, how rough they were from laying brick. I finally understood what he meant when he said work could be love if you let it. Jason was healing, slow but steady. He didn't use the cane as much, and when he came on site, he didn't limp quite as heavy. But he was still quieter than before, thoughtful. Sometimes I'd catch him watching the crew with a look I couldn't place, like he was holding something back. One Friday, we wrapped early and got burgers from this little shack down the road. Just me and Jason, sitting on the tailgate, watching the sun dip behind the tree line. He turned to me and said, "You ever think about why that day happened? The accident. I chewed my bite, swallowed slow. All the time. I wasn't supposed to be there, he said. I was covering for a manager who called out. Could have sent someone else. But I didn't. We sat in silence for a minute. I think I was supposed to meet you, he said finally. Not just because you saved my life, but because you reminded me what this work is really for. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened up. He handed me a folded paper, an offer for equity in the company. Ownership. I want you in, he said. For real. This ain't charity. You earned it. Hell, you built most of this with your bare hands. I stared at the paper. All those years scraping by, doubting myself, and here was this man telling me I was worth more than just my day rate. You sure about this? I asked. Never been more sure. I took it home. Didn't sleep that night. Sat at the kitchen table. Stared at the contract. Ran the numbers. Thought about what it meant. By morning, I signed it. The next week, I started acting like an owner. And the crew noticed. I wasn't just overseeing the work. I was invested. Every delay cut a little deeper. Every success felt sweeter. We finished the project 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Move-in day was something else. Veterans with their families. Kids running through the hallways. That Gulf War vet from earlier rolled up, this time grinning wide. Jason stood next to me as the first tenant got their keys. He leaned in and said, You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? I nodded. All the time. And I did. Because everything, every board, every job, every second chance, had grown from that one split-second choice to pull over. Life's funny like that. After the Veterans Complex wrapped, Jason and I took a step back. We didn't slow down, not really, but there was a shift. Like we both realized we were standing on a new kind of ground, one we'd built together. I wasn't just a worker anymore, and he wasn't just my boss. We were partners. The business started growing. Not in a flashy way, but steady, reliable. Word got around. We did good work, treated people fair, and built things that lasted. That's rare enough these days, I guess. City Council invited us to bid on 2 more projects. Local schools, community center renovations, stuff that mattered. I started taking more meetings, wore a button-up some days, even got business cards with my name on them. Chris Tanner, project director/co-owner. Never thought I'd see that, but I didn't stop visiting the job sites. That's where I came alive. Smell of sawdust, noise of drills, people with tools in their hands and pride in their work. I needed that. Still do. One afternoon, I was walking the foundation of a future elementary school when a young guy, maybe early 20s, came up to me. Said he'd heard I was the one behind the Veterans Build. Told me his uncle lived there now, and it changed his life. Clean place, good neighbors, a garden out back where he'd started growing tomatoes again. That hit me in the chest. Then the kid asked if we were hiring. Said he wanted to learn. Didn't have much experience, but he'd show up early, stay late, do whatever was needed. Show up Monday, I told him. Bring gloves. It reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry, unsure, full of questions. I hoped I could give him what Jason gave me, opportunity, direction, trust. Later that night, Jason and I were locking up the office when he said, You ever think about starting something separate? A branch just for community projects, schools, housing, outreach stuff. Non-profit model, maybe? I raised an eyebrow. That a hint? He smiled. Just thinking out loud. But I think you'd be the one to lead it. It stayed in my head for days. Kept coming back while I was shaving, eating breakfast, sitting in traffic. Could we do it? Should we? I talked to my brother about it. He said, You've already been doing it, man. Just sounds like now you'd give it a name. That stuck with me. A month later, Jason and I filed paperwork for a new wing of the company. Called it Blueprint Hope. Focused entirely on projects that gave back. We started small, rehabbing a few older homes for low-income families. Nothing fancy, just strong roofs, sealed windows, plumbing that didn't leak. But the gratitude we saw, man, it made every splinter worth it. And that young guy, he stuck around. Showed up early, stayed late, just like he said. I started teaching him everything I knew. One evening, I found myself watching him lay flooring while the sun went down. He looked up and smiled, sweat on his brow. I saw myself in him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was passing something on. Life's funny like that. Blueprint Hope took on a life of its own. What started as an idea tossed around on a quiet evening became something bigger than either of us expected. We had teams working across the county, some fixing up schools that hadn't seen paint in a decade, others converting old motels into shelters with dignity, the kind of work that didn't make headlines, but made life better. I kept my boots on. I liked walking into a site, shaking hands, cracking jokes, and seeing progress with my own eyes. But now, people look to me not just for instructions but for vision. That was new, and a little scary. Jason spent more time in planning and finance. Said I had the field covered, and truth be told, he was better with numbers. But every so often, we'd ride out together, talk about how it all started. He'd point at a job site and say, "Remember when you thought you were finished with this line of work?" And I'd laugh because he was right. I thought I was done, fired, forgotten. Just a guy hauling scrap and patching fences. But that day on the road, the blood on my shirt, the recovery, that was the pivot. The thing that reset the compass. One fall morning, we held a ribbon cutting for a new transitional housing unit. Media showed up, local officials gave speeches. I stood in the back mostly, sipping lukewarm coffee out of a paper cup, watching. One of the tenants, a single mom with 2 kids, came over and said, "Thank you. This place means I don't have to sleep in my car anymore." That stuck in my chest like rebar in fresh concrete. I told her, "We just build it. You're the one making it a home." After she left, Jason joined me. We stood quiet for a moment, watching those kids run around the new playground we'd installed last week. Then he said, "What would you tell the guy you were 5 years ago?" I didn't even have to think. Don't give up on yourself, even when others do. Life's got turns you can't see coming. He nodded, and we stood there a while longer. Sometimes I still drive past that stretch of road where I found him. I slow down, check the shoulder. Not out of fear, just habit. Because that bend in the road, that one random moment, led to all of this. Now, when I look at the crew, the homes, the families unpacking boxes and starting new chapters, I realize I was never just building walls or laying concrete. I was building a life mine, theirs, all of ours. Funny how life works. You think it's throwing you into the ditch, and it turns out it's pointing you toward your purpose.